Hello. Sorry, I clicked it too many times. This is a pre-recorded conversation. It's Sunday. Welcome to 50 Days of 50, but this is pre-recorded because barring weather or catastrophe, I'm now in England. And so I wanted to give myself this day to just acclimate a little bit. We will have arrived early Sunday morning. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was present for one of these conversations. And so I am delighted to introduce you to my friend, my colleague, my mentor, Russ White. I'm going to bring him right to camera. Hello, Russ.
Hi, Dana. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I just want to say I think it's really nice of you. Your travel, yes, but also not to schedule this on top of the World Cup final.
I know that was good of me, wasn't it?
Very good. Yes.
Believe me, I will be watching that from someplace like this if I have to, because
I'll
I
bet.
know I'm going to be tired. But
Well, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. I really appreciate saying yes to this. Just for context, I've known Russ probably 8 years. I met him through some professional work that I did at the Arts Partnership, and it became clear to me immediately that Russ was wise and thoughtful and kind. You are so kind, Russ. I think the first thing I ever said to you was from the audience, and I kind of called you out on something that I didn't agree with. And you could have said to me, "Who the hell are you, you punky kid?" And you didn't. You were so kind about it. And I think that cemented our friendship for me.
I remember that moment, and I think you may be right. And I think you also voiced much of what was happening in the room at the time. It was about halfway through the second day of a intense few days for the people in that room. And I think what you said was on behalf of many, and it was a good moment that shifted the rest of the afternoon. So that was very
well. I appreciate your generosity. I will just say that it takes an extraordinarily confident and someone who listens well leader to hear criticism in the moment and pivot. You didn't get snippy with me. You didn't get sort of disgruntled. You just heard it. You took it in. You acknowledged it. And then we moved on. And that was really all I needed. It was such a powerful moment for me as someone who can go from 0 to about 10,000 in, 1.2 seconds. It was really, really powerful for me to watch you respond so differently than I would have. You may or may not believe this, but I often in my mind think, okay, how would Russ White deal with this? Take a breath. And it doesn't save me, but it slows me down. So that's good. So Russ, let's jump right into the questions because I know your answers are going to be compelling. Tell me one or two things that you knew before you turned 50 that have served you well since turning 50.
Wow. I think first off, when I started thinking about this and I had the invitation, I had to realize that 50 was a non-event for me. I'm almost 64 now.
Okay.
In just a few weeks, and 50 was a non-event because for me, I went through that big life transition that some people look at as 50 or 40 or a birthday, but for me, it happened somewhere mid 40s. Okay. And I had started working with was in crisis and had started working with a Jungian analyst. Okay. And I said, first of all, I said, okay, I'm 40 something years old. Is this a midlife crisis? And my analyst said to me, no, that's a very different thing. And this is not what you're dealing with, but what you're dealing with is a transition from first half of life to second half of life. And that sort of began the exploration. But it's not something that's peculiar to me, as peculiar as I may be. It's something that everyone goes through, and men tend to go through it differently than women. So I'm told, but it does happen individually, but it also happens to everyone. that we deal with that. And a lot of times we frame that as our age. So most of what I'm talking about would be sort of first half of life, how I experience things, and then second half of life, how I experience things. But I think one of the things I learned early on was, or was a part of my life, was being attending to my physical health, attending to my mental health and my spiritual health, and that those were not, they were intertwined. So one affected the other, and feeling bruised in one, I was going to feel it in the other, but also feeling strength in one, I'd feel it in others. So I think that was a part of my life that has helped me as I'm aging and now starting to feel my body differently. And feel, things hurt in the way that they didn't. And what happened? Well, I coughed too hard. So, did you run a marathon? No. I took an extra stair.
Right.
So, but otherwise, and that's for a very healthy person. And I think also going early on, I embraced my mortality. I embraced the fact that I'm mortal, that I'm going to die. And there are reasons for that, but it was never a dread for me. The idea of mortality or of dying has never been a dread or something to resist. And so that made it really easy to embrace a lot of the living part. Because I wasn't spending a lot of energy trying to avoid dying.
Trying to run away from dying. Yeah.
Right. So Auden, W.H. Auden, author, he called it a Christmas oratorio, and I can't remember the title of it, but it ended up being a book-length poem. But he does a lot of playing with the idea of once you stop fighting death, you start living. Right? And once you stop, once you've explained everything, then the miracle happens. Or once you realize you can't explain anything is when you begin to understand. So I just have found that recently, and it resonated a lot with what my experience was. So, yeah.
Okay, so I will just say as an aside, could anyone be surprised that I resonated with the calm, measured wisdom of Russ White? I mean, that answer was utterly different than any other answer I've gotten, and perfectly you, Russ. I love it.
Thank you. May I have some cheese?
You may. I'll get that delivered as soon as I can. Okay, next question. What do you know now? And you might, I expect you'll have an unusual answer for this, Russ, because of your comfort with the trajectory of moving towards death. But what do you know now that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self and put yourself wherever you want on your continuum?
I have always struggled after what I just said, what you just heard me say. The converse of that, the shadow side of that, is that I've always struggled with control, needing to be in control. And so the way I would do that was stand to the side, watch how the system worked, and then figure out how to move into a position where I was directing it, not being directed. Okay. So that was probably my inner motivation for what I did in my career and work, and probably more in my personal relationships than was healthy at the time. But connecting that, and so part of it was never wanting to be wrong out loud. Right?
Okay.
So first half of life, what you said in that room, in that conference, would have been very difficult for me to deal with compared to years later when I was already into a different understanding, okay, and had been doing the work. So it's probably, timing was probably good, or we might not have this conversation. But some of the bumper sticker side, which is really true, is that the only way to become good at something is to be bad at it. You have to do the practice, you have to put in the work, and you have to be willing to be bad at it. And on a spiritual side, there's a theologian, Richard Rohr, who wrote not too long ago, but he said, I ask God every day for one good humiliation.
Oh.
And he said, I do that not because I like being humiliated, but because that humiliation helps me find where my ego is getting pricked. It helps me find what am I holding on to? What am I centering that may be getting in the way? And I thought about that. I read that sometime last year, and it really hooked me into something I was needing to deal with, apparently. So I rolled with that, and what emerged from that was me looking at my wife last fall saying, what would you think if I started to play the cello? If I learned to play the cello. Well, she's a pianist, and her daughter is an accomplished violinist, and she was delighted. She could have not been more encouraging. So a few weeks later, she went with me to a shop, and we bought a cello. And so I'm a year into it now, and I'm not very good yet at all. I mean, I've only been playing for a year, but I've done 2 recitals, and it's helping me deal with that learning out loud, to do something that's difficult and worthwhile that will take years to even become a basic level novice. And it's a blast. It's great fun. And I'm learning so much I never knew about the cello and how intricate it is, but even more important about myself and how I deal with feeling embarrassed or feeling great about what's happening, and then playing with other people. So I think that's part of what I am learning now that I didn't know, was that sense of just living it out loud and knowing that there's growing to be grace there.
Do you think, Russ? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was trailing off. That was the end of my thought.
Well, my question is, do you think that your younger first half of life self could have heard you, believed you, and ventured into this? Or is it a case of we really have to cross some kind of psychological divide, whether it's a birthday or a first half, second half, whatever it is? We really have to cross that divide to begin to say, boy, I see what's behind me is likely longer than what's in front, and that's how we can become reflective.
That's fascinating. I don't know. I know my younger self would not listen to my current self. I've always been a reader, and I've always read a lot, and I was very interested in what was going on, but not a lot of self-reflection. Even as an introvert, I mean, I would never say anything that I hadn't already scripted, right? And that's part of the control, and that's becoming much looser in just saying what I'm thinking. And I think my relationship with the woman I'm married to has been really helpful as a part of that. But I think, when I was younger, I don't think I could have heard it that way. And in fact, I think it probably got in the way, is that need to be right or to appear right, which meant I did a lot of homework in the background. But then by the time I got to where you hear it, it's concrete, and I can't believe it's not obvious to you. Right? I can't believe you can't see this, and I would judge you for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so here's another important piece that people, depending on how well they know me, may or may not be connecting. But you and I have very, very different personalities. But what you just said drives probably 95% of me. I've thought it through. Sure, I just thought it through half a second ago, but it's fully developed in my mind. I've now said it out loud. What in the world is the matter with you that you aren't just buying into it? I've said it, therefore it must be true.
Yes. And the world
You know,
would be a better place if people would just
for
do it.
sure. For
Just do it.
sure it would be a better place. Okay. Last question, Russ. Tell me, and I imagine that the cello is going to factor into this answer, but tell me some of the most joyful aspects of your life in this second half.
Oh gosh. Well, I think absolutely the relationship I have with Martha Grace Reese, my wife. We married in our 40s,
Mhm.
and so we were fully formed adults. It was subsequent marriage for each of us, and we had already worked out a lot of the stuff that people have to work out to be together.
Mhm.
We had already done that, and I don't know. We've just been successful at figuring this out between us, and so we were laughing this morning. Our arguments take about 3 minutes because they're so well rehearsed. We know what this argument is, and we
Yeah,
know our lines, and we know the resolution, and this is number 63, and
right.
roll right through it.
Uh-huh.
And it's not that we don't have authentic conflict, but it really doesn't stay with us, and it doesn't become an ego hook the way that it would have for me and did, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So I think that's been a great part of it. It was just so much that I thought that seemed to matter, and that I was willing to go to the mat for. First half of life, not now.
Hmm.
There are very few things that really matter now, and those things are really worthwhile.
Mhm.
And I think also being able to, I want to sound like I was such a cur when I was younger, but not far off. But so many people helped me along the way and gave me grace and gave me open doors and gave me coaching, often unsolicited.
Mhm.
Would do that. And now I'm in a place where I get to use that social capital. I get to use the privilege that I have. Basically, I mean, just look at me. I'm a tall white male, heterosexual, born in the United States in the mid 20th century. So
You tick a lot of the boxes.
just walking in the room, I've already won a lot of the arguments.
Yeah.
But now I'm in a place, and we're at a time where I can use that and parlay that on behalf of somebody else. So I can acknowledge what was done for me and do that for other people. Because I have everything I need. I've done what I wanted to do and what I want to do, and I'm doing the things that challenge me now. So now I get to make the path a little straighter, I hope, for somebody else.
Mm. Well, Russ, you did not disappoint. You are continuing the long line of really, really interesting conversations. I so appreciate your time, and I really appreciate our friendship. You are a very singular person in my life because we are so different in so many ways. And I really value that I value that you pick up the phone when I call you, because when I call you, it's usually because I'm in some sort of professional crisis and I need your guidance, and you always give it. So thank you for that and for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you for this conversation, and happy birthday.
Thanks, Russ. We'll talk soon, I hope. Everyone else, I will see you live tomorrow.